And so we decided to say, we're going to bug this used car. It had 110,000 miles on it, had a few issues with it. Plus, we bugged it with a few more things. And we gave each one of the technicians, had a little contest. They would win a prize at the end. But we asked them to all do the same green, yellow, red multi-point inspection. And we were shocked to find 45 different multi-point inspections.
Hello and welcome everyone to this brand new episode of the Auto Tech Show. My name is Mark Babin, and as always, it's great to have you with me for what's another exciting episode today. Now today we're talking all about radical transparency in vehicle inspections and how technology will without doubt play a role. And to tackle this topic, we are very lucky to be joined by a true automotive industry legend with more than 40 years of direct dealership experience, holding roles from service manager to fixed operations to general manager, and with some of the top 50 dealer groups in the United States. It's safe to say that we're in for a proper lesson when it comes to our topic, and I couldn't be happier about it. Don Andres, thank you so much for being with me today. I'm really excited about this. I've been really amped up for it all week here. But first and foremost, thank you so much for your time today. I know you have a busy day.
Well, thanks for the invite, Mark. I also have been pretty excited about this because I don't get many conversations to talk to people across the ocean. And, cars are cars, but it is fun. And so, yes, I'm as excited as you are about diving into these subjects.
You're right. Yeah, cars are cars. And I just mentioned to you before we record there, I've lived on both sides of the water owning cars. So the difference is there, and we'll get into it a little bit today. But you're right. At the end of the day, a car is a car, a service is a service. It's all required and it's all necessary. But how we can kind of expose that transparency, I think, is key. And that's really a topic I'm looking forward to having with you today. So let's jump straight into it when we look inside this service bay garage. Again, whether we're talking about a dealership or an aftermarket owned service center, what are some of the most effective technological products that you've seen when it comes to transparency, particularly that you're excited to be seeing on the market?
Yeah. First, we have what we traditionally call a DMS, which is a dealer management system that's going to be the focal point of generating repair orders. They typically are going to have an appointment system built into that for appointments to schedule for a service department. And then that's what the technician is going to work off of as well, too, both to see the concerns as well as document what they've found and what the repairs are. And so by the time the customer picks up the vehicle, all that process is complete. Most of the DMSs today, the larger groups, have all sorts of products attached to that multi-point inspection process. They've got a calendar for appointment process and things of that nature, and follow-up and things of that nature. But invariably, there are a multitude of products, ancillary products, that will focus just on one specific area. Maybe it's just the multi-point inspection process, and they've really figured out and engineered that. Or it's a service BDC company that says, hey, look at, I know you have trouble answering your phone sometimes. We're going to offer manpower or now even some AI to assist with that. And so I think probably the things that got me the most excited in recent years is the level of engagement that we're asking the technicians to do on the multi-point inspection. We now have this link up where they can use their own cell phone and video record the multi-point inspection. It takes me back to the days that I started in the business in 1979, where technicians were, in those days, paid 50-50. So I got 50% of the labor rate, and they really ran the shop. So it was not uncommon for a customer who drove into the center of the shop to get written up that they would get flagged into a bay, the car would be in the air, and the technician is with the customer under the car, and they would wave me over with a clipboard, and he would start pointing out areas of concerns. And it was a huge trust factor. Customers were getting the firsthand knowledge, and this video capturing is a little bit of a take back to that, where the tech is talking to the customer, and there's some things to work out in that. We can talk about the things that are already starting to get a little bit of exposed in that, and what is the advisor role. But that's an exciting deal. And then and we'll talk probably a little bit more as well too about now AI coming into the service appointment process, and so that'll be a fun subject as well too. So yeah, everybody's trying to help the service advisor, that hectic position where cars are coming in, they're trying to get written up. And that's great, but that can also overwhelm. So we'll probably talk a little bit about the idea that advisors can have way too many screens opened up on their desktop, and in fact, it can be a stressful position as well too.
Yeah, when we go a little bit too far on the tech reliant side. One thing you noted on there is, and I want to bring back, is just that touch on going back to that, perhaps walking under the vehicle with the technician now being done with video. And I think a lot of other technical tools are kind of throwing back to that era. Did we lose track along the way, this trust aspect, and it just started to become efficiency in the process and losing touch of what does the customer actually need to know, and that nod back to doing things the old way? Is that something you're seeing more and more with solutions?
Yeah, that's so true. That's a great question, because, I think of my father would take his car up to the local Texaco station, and he didn't pull in and go and get the guy that was running the station. No, he would walk right into where the tech bay was, and the guy would stop what he's doing, walk out, and pop the hood, look underneath, and go, "Yeah, looks like you're going to need a water pump. Go tell the guy," and then you'd walk in. So there was always the connection with the technician, and I think in the 80s, there was a transition from carburation, fuel injection. Dealerships were getting built bigger and bigger, and there was this wall that suddenly was getting separated, where we had this write-up area, and then we had the shop. Prior to that, it was not uncommon that the cars would drive right through the middle of the shop and get written up at a bench at the end of the shop, right? And once that wall was put in place, some techs liked it. They didn't like talking to customers. But boy, we officially became a conversation and trust building with the advisor, because they no longer were talking to technicians. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a good comparison to when there was that shift in vehicles, and we've seen that shift go even further now with electric vehicles, and that perhaps that wall's getting even thicker. I can't think of a service center that has it that old way, unless it's your corner, your neighborhood guy that you've gone to for the last 20, 30 years. But those are kind of disappearing because of how complicated vehicles are getting. I remember an episode I had done a while back where the gentleman I was speaking to had purchased a new Volvo, and when it was on lease, he always had to go to the dealership because it was on lease. And as soon as it was off lease, he went to his previous tech, but his tech actually couldn't deal with the vehicle because the licensing to license the software tools, that garage didn't want to pay the Volvo fee for it. So therefore he couldn't actually go to his old place anymore. And cars are getting more and more technical like this. Oh. Does it make it harder then to do that step back to the old way?
Yeah. So EV, certainly in Europe, we see that that level of embracing the EV even more than the United States. We've had a little cooling period now, but there was a whole transition where the dealerships really rose up. Prior to that, independents had their place along with dealerships. Right. They worked side by side. And then when the fuel injection system came in place and there was this whole diagnostic required that these carburetor guys at the independents just didn't understand, there was a real transition back to dealerships. I remember being part of that. Well, we see that again. The infrastructure now involved in diagnostic equipment and the proprietary programming that is now in place is going to be a challenge for the independent for a while, and then of course there's the whole idea of there's a potential for less maintenance requirements. You're going to have tires, you're going to have programming and things of that nature, but not as much, right? And so, yeah, that's I'm I'm winding down in my career, but it's an interesting transition, and it does remind me of the transition from carburation to fuel injection. The young guys embraced it. The old guys didn't want to learn it. And we saw a big transition there, too. So I think that'll get worse, your Volvo experience, for a period of time. And by the way, that's not because they're just trying to hoard that work from a dealership standpoint. It's the seriousness of having competency in both being able to go in and diagnose correctly. Right. And we're talking about a vehicle that programmed incorrectly can play havoc with somebody and with the driver. So it isn't anything more than just, I think the manufacturer wants to make sure that the repairs are done correctly.
Yeah, with how complicated and how many systems this software-defined vehicle that we have now, to be able to diagnose and not damage something accidentally, I think is a good point to bring up. So earlier you brought up the service advisor, and this is something I want to discuss in a little bit more depth. So balancing technology, balancing that human touch and that human experience, I think is a really delicate balance that many are still trying to find and figure out, as you spoke to, the way it used to be, the way it is now. And it puts really that focus back on the service advisor, especially given how the average driver maybe doesn't understand the common issues. They see a warning light. That's the extent of all they need to know when they bring it to the dealership or the service center. How important is the role of service advisor then in this new world we're living in, and the world as it will evolve, that service advisor role when it comes to having recommended services done properly, that trust built? How important is that role?
Boy, that's everything, isn't it? We have two things that are definitely pretty consistent. One is that customers typically don't know much beyond changing the oil, rotating tires, occasional brake work, and things of that nature on their vehicle. And by the way, they probably don't really want to necessarily learn it. There are car guys, but in all honesty, there's a lot of people that are busy with other things in their life, and so they just don't have time necessary to really learn and understand it. So it's interesting. This new technology is making it simpler, where they're sending that text video right to the customer and allowing the customer on their cell phone to be able to accept or decline the additional work. So the positive is they can see that the brakes need to be done. But in all honesty, once beyond that, the oil leaks, the coolant leaks, the worn suspension components, they're looking at it, they're really not understanding it. And so what we're finding already is this decline button getting hit way too easy. One, it's too much information. I'll just decline. And then you'll see that they'll loop back and say, well, let's go ahead and do that maybe 2 hours later. But in all honesty, that is unfortunately a pretty fast way to decline needed services. So the idea of customer engagement, this idea of having a conversation that advisors have really honed those skills over the years, is still the secret sauce to being profitable in a service department. And it's twofold. One, we need those additional services done. If they just changed oil all day long or they just fixed the check engine light, it's a pretty tough way to make a profit in a service operation. I wrote a book recently talking about why service departments fail to grow, and it's almost all this lack of engagement. So the advisor has to have time. In the beginning of the write-up process, they need to have time to say, let's talk about the car for just a minute. What's your plans with the car? Are you turning it back in soon, or is this something you were hanging on to? And, of course, they said, well, no, I was going to give it to my daughter. Great. Well, if that's the case, we'll do a multipoint inspection. It's just a visual inspection, but I'll give you the results. If everything looks good, you'll get that when you pick it up. If there's anything of a concern, I'll call you. I'll let you know. We'll walk it through together. And if it makes sense in your budget, we can get it done. The good news is we can get it done in this visit. I know how tough it is to bring your car in for service. And these are literally casual conversations that you're doing this level of engagement. And the customer starts to realize, well, this is a genuine person. He's certainly an expert in what he's talking about, so the trust factor almost immediately starts. There's this care and trust factor. So now the multipoint inspection comes back. We've got the diagnosis for the check engine light, but then we also found a couple concerns. And because we know, hey, I know you're passing a car on to your daughter, so there's a couple things I want to pause and just talk to you, get you up to speed on, and then whatever you decide is fine with me. But let's take the time right now and do that, as opposed to that quick click of that text, right? And so we see a high level of approvals in advisors presenting, but in fact had built that engagement first, and then we see the normal lack of engagement with an advisor, and the same approval rates with the technicians really sending that really good information, but the customer just doesn't necessarily understand the vehicle.
Yeah, I think having that initial conversation, as you mentioned, there is a really key part, because it establishes that relationship that you want to do, rather than just throwing a text, which is non-emotional and very like data driven, I guess. But does the truth then, I mean, I was going to ask about bridging the gap for service advisors here with technology, but it seems like the real truth is kind of that bit of both, where you have that personal engagement, but then you have that non-biased data that can be used to establish trust. Here's the issue we found. Here's the data that shows it to you. And that way it's non-ambiguous. You can't debate it. Here's your tires. Look, here's your tread point. I think this is unsafe for you. That you can't really negotiate that, and it comes from a place of concern. And like you said, with the example for handing the car down, I want what's best for you, and I don't want to put your daughter in an unsafe position. So, is the truth then using technology to support the relationship, not the other way around?
100%. You have that correct. It's amazing when we say, hey, I'm going to go ahead and send you a link right now where you're going to be able to actually look at your car. And so we're going to walk through a couple of things. There's some tire measurements. There's some brake measurements that I have some concerns about. I want to talk about that. And then we notice this coolant leak. It's a small leak, but you can see where this is coming in, and this is a concern. So yes, they're looking at it together. Incredibly powerful, because now you're there, you're answering questions. And by the way, as you give those prices and you talk about that, and they say, boy, I'm not sure I can get it all done, the really good advisors are going to say, no problem, let's get some things accomplished today. And then you and I, when you come to pick up the vehicle, will actually put a plan together so that by the time winter comes, by the time blah, 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 the car is back to where you can feel comfortable, you can feel great, and we've worked within your budget. Now, these are easy, comfortable, yet powerful words that you can tell a customer the shoulders will just drop and they'll go, oh, okay. And by the way, they now are coming and are staying loyal to you, because why? Why would I go someplace else and hope to get this level of engagement, this trust they've already started to build someplace else? So it's a win-win, and so there's a lot of strategies to even get declined work looped back in and get done as well too. And so technology, customer engagement, they absolutely work hand in hand. I agree with you. Without technology, now it's just me talking about it. Yeah. So great point.
Something that just came up as well, and I think you'd have an interesting insight on this, is taking the time to do this with a customer is valuable, without question. I don't debate that at all. But how real is it in this shortage era we're in, where service centers, dealerships, they're really lacking people, and they can't take the time maybe that they want to or that they should to deal with customers? How do we deal with that? Is that something you're seeing?
Well, yeah. Mark, I would tell you that's everything. Let me give you a couple examples. I was visiting a store down in Texas just a few weeks ago that has got a express 3 lanes that are set up for changing oil and rotating tires and very minor things. And then there's the main shop. And they were doing probably 60 oil changes a day. The problem is that they have the mantra, and some of the manufacturers have this mantra of no appointment necessary, service while you wait. Well, it turned out that people kind of think alike. And so it was not uncommon. And the reason I was asked to come in there is it was taking 3 hours to do that quick lube. Customers were told that when they dropped off, hey, you can wait for it if you'd like. We're about 2.5, 3 hours out. Or would you like to leave it? Or what would you like to do? The people were just dumbfounded. Wait a minute. I thought this was an express. I thought this was a quick. We see it even on Saturday mornings with quick lubes places on a Saturday morning. They'll line up. They may only take 15 minutes, 20 minutes to do an oil change, but with 8 cars ahead of you, you're going to be there a while because it's Saturday morning. And the customers see that in that line, but they don't see it at these facilities where the car is in a separate area. They're writing them up, and then they're made aware of that in that moment. So we create some of this chaos. We create some of this stress and this push in the morning write-ups, especially because that's when people need to get to work and things of that nature. Yep. So this is probably the area of expertise, and really what I talk about the most in the book is this stress and chaos is something we create because we don't value the idea of the phone call, that reaching out that they do. And by the way, people don't want to waste time, so they'll call or they'll go online because they don't want to show up only to be discovered that they can't get the work done that day. How much we value that, how much we work around their busy life and schedule something that makes sense to them and still puts us in a position where we have slowed the process down. We can take all the cars in. We just have to work around their busy life because we know if I spend 10 minutes with them during the write-up talking about this, we're going to have a great day. We actually prepare. We actually take that phone call on that appointment. We value it. We get all the information so that by the time that door is opening, we have a full write-up reservation ready. We're just waiting for them to arrive. And they're arriving on time because we worked around their schedule. We knew what time they started work in the morning. We knew how far work was from the dealership. And so we gave them a time worked for them. And we also said, hey, we've got a time before and a time after, so if you could be as close to that time as possible, we'll be able to spend the time with you. And guess what? They do. They do.
Because they want to know. I think there's that care enough that, I would. If you're going to take the time, I would like to take the time with you as well.
That's exactly right. I had a Lexus store in Charlotte, and that time was the only Lexus store in Charlotte. And so they were doing 200 Lexus a day. That was a big place. They could fit 18 cars in the service write-up area. But that push, those 12 writers, would start at 7:30 in the morning, and the line wouldn't break till 11 o'clock in the morning. And it was chaotic. It was hectic. Even though they got a wonderful, positive experience, they had plenty of support staff, and they couldn't get this push. And I said, well, you're just not valuing the phone call. And so I trained up their BDC. There are 8 people in their BDC that were making appointments to not just give a date and time, but in fact, let's talk about this for just a minute and ask key questions, and then told them, hey, this is going to be your time slot only, so let's make sure we get on time. And within 3 months, the push was gone. It was a calm, highly productive, and we still did the 200 Lexus a day. So it always can be fixed. It's just a matter of whether you value the phone call and never get surprised by a customer.
I like that mention. Chaos causes chaos. I think if you're disorganized and if you're rushing something, then it's only going to snowball as that comes down the hill and more people, and as the scale grows. I think that's a really important topic. But I like the 10 minutes. I think taking the time, whether it's 5 minutes, 10 minutes, taking the time on the call sets expectations that the team can deliver on based on, and I think this is important, based on how your staffing issue is. If you're low on staff, manage expectations in a real sense. That has to be true, especially as we see this sort of tech shortage happen.
Yeah.
Awesome. I think it's a good point. It's something we're thinking about for a lot of the places out there, because having that shift, as I mentioned, I've owned cars in Canada, come in, and I've come here, and I think the attention to structure and standardization in Europe is something that's very different, and not singling out any specific place, but in general, owning a car in North America versus Europe, the standardization of process is super clean cut in Europe. And I think that's just by way of nature of the way things are here. People have the rules, they follow the rules, they show up on time, they know it's very punctual. Maybe that's an Austrian thing. Maybe different in the UK, maybe different in other parts of Europe. But yeah, I think that geographic difference is quite interesting. Have you seen much difference in working in different areas of North America or working in different types of dealerships where that standardization has really been a godsend for that operation?
It's interesting because it really comes down to the actual dealer group themselves.
Okay.
You know, it's there's a group in the United States, Fred Beans, and I remember going 15 years ago to a seminar he spoke at, and his commitment to the level of preparation in his service drive was so intense. It was so structured, like you just said, that he would have a manager for every 3 service advisors. And it was a big place. And he had a collection of stores that he had. And their job was strictly to critique the write-up process to make sure they were hitting each step. They would have a clipboard. They were checking boxes that all of the steps were properly hit. And I was working for a very large Ford dealership. We were selling way more Fords we could possibly service, so it was always hectic. And I brought back that idea of valuing the level of preparation and then making sure we're hitting all the marks. You want to talk about a technician retention issue. It's when we ask them to get in the middle of that chaos and that hecticness. So if a customer's coming in and we didn't speak to them and we didn't prepare for them, it's not so much that we can't fix that check engine light, but they're busy. And so it's not uncommon for them to say at 10 o'clock in the morning, by the way, I need the car back at 2 o'clock. Okay, well, that's going to be probably virtually impossible because of how much work is already in the shop. But they don't want to make the customer mad or frustrated. They care about the customer. So they'll say something as innocent as, let me see what I can do. Now, for a customer, they just heard, great, 2 o'clock, I'm on. Why? Because I got to get my son to soccer practice or whatever might be the case, right? That's what's going on in their world. And so now the writer is going to take that into the shop with a promised time that's totally unrealistic. And now that technician who's in the middle of trying to diagnose something is going to have to stop. He's going to have to try to figure out what's going on here. And now that stress and chaos just carries right over. And when that does, it's work. You would think on a service, they're staying busy, they're still making a paycheck, but it's tough work. It's diagnostic work. It's work that they can't be very productive at because they're still in that diagnostics. So they need those additional services, the stuff that doesn't require diagnosis. They can turn their brain off and just go and do the actual work to pad their paychecks and allow them to feel good about they had a very good, high productive day. In the United States, most of them are commission-based. Most of them are flat rate. They're not paid hourly.
Okay.
So they rely heavily on those additional services to get sold. And if we're not connecting with a customer, we're just going fast as a writer because we care, so we go fast in that morning rush. And we're not connecting. Now when they try to sell those additional services, they're going, who are you again? Oh, I was the individual that wrote you up this morning. Oh, yeah, I think I'll just pass. And so now the tech didn't get that additional authorization. So he's back to the grind and the hecticness. And so what happens is now when a dealership reaches out to them and says, hey, we're going to offer you some more money, and they don't see this chaos ever ending, they'll take the phone call. And they suddenly will look for a new opportunity, not so much for the money, though the money usually helps, and that's the enticement. They just want to get out of the chaos and stress. Or the opposite, if you've got this well-structured, machine-like attitude that's happening, like your European approach, where they have a very structured day and it works, they don't take that phone call. Why would I go someplace else and hope it's as good as I have it here? I've got a good gig. I'm not going to screw up a good gig. And so retention for that store never is a conversation. Yeah.
Yeah, and retention is such a key thing these days. And I think you're right. If it's a positive environment where it's a healthy work environment, they're not stressed at the end of every 12-hour day, they're happy, they get the toys to play with, they don't over push themselves. The expectation management is on point. Yeah. Why would you ever leave? This seems like a perfect deal, and you can learn, and you have good colleagues around you that are also in the same boat.
Yeah.
It's just a better camaraderie and a better atmosphere. I think that has a big point in it. So the last point I wanted to bring up here is, and I think this kind of bridges really well when we talk about this overload, is the consistency and the inspection variance that we see. And I know it's something that I've seen a lot of, and I'm sure you've seen a lot of as well. And that's why I wanted to kind of get your insights here on this. So what are the most common variances that you've seen that have a direct link to inspection quality when we look at work done by one technician over to another technician? And how do these differences impact the customer trust and that overall customer experience with that service center?
Boy, that's a great question, right? I mean, Mark, at the end of the day, once you've got everything pretty well dialed in and you start looking at the quality of the multi-point inspection and start realizing within your shop that you have 10 technicians, you've got 20 technicians, or like the one store I was at, we had 45 technicians, and we started to look at the variances between the multi-point inspections with vehicles with the similar age and mileage. We were shocked. So we actually created a little contest because we didn't understand it. And so we decided to say, we're going to bug this used car, had 110,000 miles on it, had a few issues with it, plus we bugged it with a few more things. And we gave each one of the technicians, had a little contest. They would win a prize at the end, but we asked them to all do the same green, yellow, red multi-point inspection. And we were shocked to find 45 different multi-point inspections. There was no two multi-point inspections the same, because their opinion of what was failing and what was needed to be cautioned, were unbelievably. Some guys saw real concerns with this front suspension. There was some looseness and play. It was causing some tire wear. Other guys didn't necessarily like to do suspension components, and they glossed right over it. The same with some of the other things, right? They love to do brakes, but they didn't necessarily like to do engine oil leaks. And here there was this engine oil leak, not severe, but boy, it should be cautioned. Hey, we've got some leakage starting to happen on coolant. And so it turns out, from a management standpoint, you want to grow your service operations, you want to grow your net profits, you have to put the writer in a position to be successful by presenting all the concerns with the customer. They'll decide what they want to do with the car. They'll decide what the speed of getting all these things done. But to not give them all the information because you don't necessarily like doing that type of work is unfortunately a real customer dissatisfaction, because they could literally go someplace else and suddenly, either because of a check engine light that came on and suddenly they found themselves at another facility, they did a multi-point inspection and they found issues you didn't find. Now you've lost all credibility with them, and they won't be back. And worse, they may in fact spread that word to other people.
They likely will. That's how it works.
So
right?
having a structured store where the service manager literally has time, and there's some technology products out there, by the way, that are phenomenal at doing the multi-point inspection, but not necessarily, they don't always report anything more than the closing. Here's how many recommendations, here's the closing percentage, and that's fine. But there is a couple technology companies out there that will measure the number of cautions and fails over a month period, and you can now look at that in relations to everybody else in the shop, which is what this particular product we had did. And once we exposed that, once we put it up on a bulletin board and said, hey, here's how many cautions and fails you did with tires, here's how many you did with this component, same age and mileage, they self-critiqued. They actually realized it, and by the way, they were leaving money on the table, and everything improved. And of course, our net profits and bottom lines dramatically increased with the same number of vehicles coming through the door every day, and that was exciting. That was fun.
Yeah, that's just free money at that point, essentially.
Yeah, and happy technicians.
Happy techs and happier customers that are going to come back. I never would have thought, it makes perfect sense, but to have technician influence, their personal influence, actually have a direct result on that inspection. I mean, it makes perfect sense as you say it. If you don't like to do something, you're going to kind of give it a half look and then move on and, put a marker in the middle. And maybe if it's a severe thing, but you didn't look at it deep enough, versus if you have a passion for tires, let's say, and you do a proper tire check and a proper tread check and an alignment check, then that's obviously much better for everyone involved, but it could be so easy to gloss over that if you just don't have an interest in it.
And I think measuring
that one experience.
Yeah, Mark, you're exactly right. And I think measuring tires and brakes are pretty standard. But boy, it gets really bearings and noises and things of that nature that some guys are very focused on that are truly starting to have issues. So, yeah, it's really interesting. It really is. Now, by the way, they don't do it on purpose. I don't want to give the wrong impression. They're ignoring these things, but their understanding of that particular facet is such that they gloss over it, is I think the term used, and that's exactly right. Yeah,
it's in sort of a subconscious or an unconscious bias that they have without knowing it. And it's nothing, like you said, no one's doing this on purpose. No one's checking a car to a sub quality than they know they should. It's just the nature of the beast. Everyone has a personality and yeah, that's just how it's going to happen. But hopefully I think, and the bridge for this is how do we solve this consistency error? I think technology has a large part of it. As you say, you can do these tests and do these measurements and have tools that create a standardization rather than an opinion-based approach. Is that sort of what brings this full circle, is bringing technology in to eliminate these variances?
Yeah. First of all, they're checking that field, right? When they do the electronic multi-point inspection, the cautions and fails are just simply a box that field is getting checked. And so the data's there. Is somebody willing and valuing the programming necessary to create a report, right? I talk about this from time to time with some of the technology companies. I said, once you have everybody aligned and everybody is committed to the process, and now we just want to enhance the quality of that and then give those results to a management team that they can see it and have that conversation. By the way, one conversation is all it usually takes, but you're right, unless they're running through 100 multi-point inspections every day, that's tedious, it's long. It's great as a starting point to have conversations. You can grab 100 of them and look through them in a day and realize, but you can't do it every day. So technology needs to be able to do that. In fact, that particular report I'd run once a month. And then put on the bulletin boards because, they worked on 65 cars over the month. The average mileage was 68,000 miles. And so here's how many cautions and fakes in these different categories was actually checked, either cautioned or failed. And to be honest with you, I think cautions are much more valuable than fails. Fails are pretty obvious, right? But cautions are powerful tools to prepare a client base for future needs, and they become, I think, as valuable as the failures in that regard. As far as AI is concerned, and I think
I was going to bring it up.
Excited,
this is where AI plays a role.
Yeah, I'm excited to where that's going on the BDC side. For example, I'm working with a company right now, a startup company in the UK that is doing service BDC, and it is impressive what they're able to accomplish when phone calls are coming in. And they're just beta testing it right now. But I enlighten them on the fact that you can't just give a date and time. And I'll give you the best example of that if we've got a few minutes left still.
Of course.
But what happens with a typical scheduler, a customer's going to call sometimes last minute. I've got travel plans and I haven't changed the oil. I got to get that in. And they'll call and ask for the next available time. That time on the calendar might be 11 o'clock in the morning. And so AI is able to walk through that pretty fast and give them the 11 o'clock on Wednesday. The problem is they have to be at work at 9 o'clock in the morning. And so what do? There they are at 8:15 in the morning, sitting in your drive, and you greet them. You say, "Do we have you scheduled today?" "Oh, yeah." And they said, "Well, wait a minute, I have you at 11 o'clock. "Yeah, I'm a little early. I have to get to work, but that was your only available slot." and they gave it to me. And so now the writer doesn't necessarily like the customer, so it goes really fast because somewhere in there's this real 8:15, and now you go to the 8:15 and you say, "Hi, we have you scheduled today?" And they say, "Yeah, why did I make an appointment if I just have to wait? I got to get to work." So now the writer goes just as fast with that customer. Yeah. And so on the surface, this idea of AI helping with taking phone calls and giving date and times for the easy oil changes, things of that nature, seems good. But what we're working on is finding out more information on the phone call. I have available times. I want to work around your busy schedule. What makes sense for you are questions that we really need to ask, and then look at the calendar and see a time slot that works. And then, like we talked about earlier, by the way, I do have an 8 o'clock and I do have an 8:30. So if you could be as close to 8:15 as possible, we'll be able to get you taken care of. It's impressive, the thinking that can be done with AI today. But if we're not loading in this concept of working around that customer's life, and I'll finish with this, the amount of frustration service advisors have, and I have always have, with the BDC making appointments on the service side, not sales, but on the service side, is incredible. It's always a frustration point. They love the idea that someone's answering the phone calls because it's hectic, and almost immediately they say, "I cannot believe they've loaded us up with this many appointments at this time. Don't they understand? Now we're 6 people backed up in the express lane. Why does the BDC constantly do this to us?" Type of statements, and all you got to do is ask a service manager, and that's almost the daily conversation that the service advisors are going to have, even though it's a needed part of the equation that has to take place. So I'm hoping that AI will start to recognize that. I know that this startup is very, very focused and appreciates me working with them on this development of asking the right questions and then working around their customer's life.
It sounds like a really quite a low-hanging fruit to take advantage of for a lot of shops that maybe struggle with this initial phase. And if that initial phase sets you up for success, it's really giving you every opportunity to succeed throughout that service and throughout that customer's journey with that service center. So really taking advantage of that initial talk, that initial booking, that getting them in and making sure that you have all the tools you need to do it properly. It sounds like the lowest hanging fruit to take advantage of, especially with AI and all these new tools coming into play.
Yeah, again, it's being prepared, never being surprised. Customer says, "I need a shuttle." Oh, you know what I mean? Whereas if we asked the day before, "Will you be dropping it off or taking advantage of our complimentary shuttle? What's your plans?" "Yeah, the shuttle would be great. And where is the address you'll be heading to?" I get that information a day ahead of time. I can map out my shuttle runs. I can map out everything I need to make this a really calm and highly productive day. If I have some day before preparation, I can see everything. I have all the information I need. And so, the motivation to write that book was all based on the leadership really understanding that we are, in fact, creating most of the stress and chaos in our service departments strictly by not valuing the phone call.
Wow. It's such an obvious solution to a lot of problems that happen further and down that line. And it seems like it's an easy win. So definitely encourage our readers to check out that book. I'll have it in the link below. It's a nice read and lots of, easy wins in there, I think, as well. So listen, it's fantastic talk. I know I want to give you some time to prep for your next podcast, your next panel that you're speaking on today, but this has been phenomenal. I've got so many notes on my paper here. So, Don, thank you so very much for today. I really, really appreciate everything.
So happy you invited me. I've been to your beautiful city one time on a trip down the Danube, awesome. So I'm jealous of how beautiful the city that you're living in. But thank you for the invitation. I've really enjoyed the conversation. This has been great.
Absolutely. We'll find an excuse to get you back. I think then we'll set that as a goal for the next year for sure. We'll find an excuse to get you back out here.
Perfect. Thanks again for your time.
Good. Thanks, Don. And for everyone watching and listening, thank you very much for being part of this episode. It's been, an absolutely inspiring and whirlwind episode. Lots to digest and to look more into in your operations, especially if you are one of those service center operators or managers or even techs. Take a lot of what you heard today and apply it to your center and see what comes out the other side. I think it's really interesting. So again, a big thank you to Don for joining me on this episode. If you want to learn more about what he's doing, head down below. There's a couple of links there for you to check out, as well as get in touch with us on LinkedIn if you want to reach out and have a conversation there. You never know where that leads. It may be something that comes up in a future episode. So we'll leave it there. Thank you all so very much for joining us. Wishing you a great day wherever in the world you may be. We'll see you on the next episode. Bye for now.